So today's class is on locally advanced esophagus. So what I have tried to do is I'm not going to traditionally go saying that this is the role of surgery, this is the role of. What we'll do is we'll divide the esophagus clinically how the circumstances come. The first 5-10 minutes we'll be spending on the management of cervical esophagus. The cause of esophagus is no role for surgery. So I repeat, no role for surgery. If the patient it's fit and needs to be treated curatively, the only option we have is radical chemoradiation. So that is the key takeaway. So if you remember only that much at the end of the class for cervical esophagus, that radical chemoradiation is important. The reason why surgery is difficult because of its anatomical location, that it has quite critical surrounding structures, and these resections are actually quite mutilating, requiring pharyngeal resections, larynx resection, and the esophagus from down getting pulled upwards. So very morbid resections. So concurrent chemoradiation for cervical cancer remains the standard of care. Now, the few practical tips about what exactly goes into radiation when you are radiating a cervical esophagus. So there are a few things which you should know, that whenever you plan a field for radiation, the field extends 5 centimeters above the gross tumor and 5 centimeters below the gross tumor. So for discussion, if there is a 1 centimeter tumor, the y-axis or the longitudinal extent of the tumor will be at least 11 centimeters, and the width is approximately 8 centimeters. Now, what you treat here is the gross tumor plus the mediastinal nodes, but plus the supraclav and the low anterior cervical nodes. So what actually turns out kind of a T kind of a field, which takes into account the whole of cervical node. Now, what we also must remember here is that when we treat these tumors, there is no role for elective nodal radiation. There are good studies which have shown that giving elective nodal radiation does not help. So you only treat the involved fields. Now, this is, I have already discussed this, because if you try to give elective field radiation, there's a good meta-analysis which suggests that there is no difference in OS recurrence rates between elective versus involved field. And when you do elective nodal radiation, the chances of having acute radiation pneumonitis increase drastically. That is like 2 to 3 times. Now, the question comes is, if you want to treat, what should be the dose of radiation? There have been good studies. There are actually 2 randomized studies. I'm not showing the latest study which is come in JC. I'm showing you the classical study which came in JAMA a few decades back, where they gave the patient CTRT, and along with the chemotherapy which was given as 5-FU cisplatin, the question was 50.4 gray was considered the standard, 1.8 gray per fraction. If the dose increases to 64.8, does it lead to an improvement in outcomes? Another thing which you must remember is that when you treat esophageal cancer, all esophageal cancers are not the same. You need to know what is the performance status. Like in this study, and I'll point out this later, it was that 60 to 80, what we would call as performance status 2, are 40% of the patients. Size greater than 50 centimeters are again nearly 50% of the patients. Weight loss is seen again in nearly 40 to 50%. So what you can see is that in 40 to 50% of the patients, the length of the tumor is more than 5 centimeters. There is weight loss present, which is greater than 10%, and more majority of them are also quite 40% and also PS2. So we are looking at something which is seen in the real world. And what was shown as here was that there was no benefit of giving high doses of radiation. So the dose stands at 50.4 gray. And there is a repeat trial similar which got published in JCO in 2021, where they compared 50 against 61 this time, again the same result. So there are 2 randomized studies which have clearly shown that there is no benefit of giving dose in a radical setting of a dose beyond 50.4 gray. So that's it. So for you need to do radiation 50.4, 5 centimeters above the gross tumor, 5 centimeters below the gross tumor, 8 centimeter width, and you need to add chemotherapy with that. And why is that you don't give higher dose? Because higher dose is associated with high amount of treatment-related deaths that can be seen here, 2 as opposed to this many. And I also understand something. The CTRT in esophagus is not something which every patient is going to complete. If you see that the completion rates for chemotherapy and even that for radiation are in the region of 60 to 70%. So don't be surprised. If you use standard dose, it increases to 86%, but the chemo still remains around the same of 60%. So if when you're planning 50.4 gray, expect that around 80% of your patients will complete it. The complete chemotherapy regimens, which was cis-5FU in this, will be completely taken by 60% of the 60% of your patients. So now, do you need to add chemotherapy to radiation? Yes, you need to add chemotherapy with radiation. Again, if you look at this study, nearly 50% of the patients had PS2. There is a good amount of patients who had weight loss, which is nearly 70%, and a good amount of patients who had tumor larger than 5 centimeters. So when you look at that study of 60.4 versus 81, this subset of patients is actually better than that. There were only 40%, 50% of PS2 weight loss. Here we are talking about nearly 80%, 70% patients having this, who are these features. And what it did show is that it was very clear that addition of chemotherapy, which in this case was cisplatin 5FU, led to a survival benefit over radiation. So, and obviously, when you add chemotherapy to radiation, there would be side effects. And these side effects are severe, and they can be seen in around 30 to 40% of your patients. So you could see that the combined model is 44% of the patients with severe side effects. Life-threatening side effects are 20%. So that's important, that when you use cis-5FU with radical radiation, 20% of your patients, even in trial setting, are going to have severe side effects. And it's important to understand here the role comes of proper case selection for this patients. Now, this is again another study which was done from SGPGI Lucknow. Again, this design remained the same, small study of RT versus RT plus, but the sensitizer use was weekly cisplatin in low doses, that was 35 milligram per meter square, and similar results we got that it led to a benefit. Now, so what again I would like to stress is that there are multiple types of CTRT regimens which can be used, and this is the list I could make from NCCN and from phase 2 and phase 3 which are gone across the world. The commonest used regimens is cisplatin 5FU when you look at giving it for radical CTRT. Sometimes these tumors land up with cervical cancer, can land up with a head and neck cancer specialist because PF is going to cervical tumor. And hence, if it does that, people also have given high doses of cisplatin. People have given an interesting regimen called a FLEP also. Cisplatin low dose, study coming from SGPGI Lucknow. Paclitaxel cisplatin, docetaxel, american cisplatin, all these have been tried. So you have a variety of regimens to choose from. Most of the people should go for cisplatin 5FU or for the low doses of cisplatin or paclitaxel platinum kinds of regimens. Now, is there a benefit of one regimen over the other? We don't have direct head-to-head studies. There's some evidence which comes from meta-analysis that in any CTRT setting, not in radical setting, but in any CTRT, when you're planning to do surgery after that, there seems to be a better role for taxane-based regimens than cisplatin 5FU based regimens. So what we could gather it from that for radical setting, you could use any one of those choices which are listed below. If you're going to use for any CTRT, it's better to use a taxane kind of a regimen. Now, where does the role of NSCT comes in cervical esophagus? And this is a very good paper from Dr. Vanitha ma'am, and I think this is something which you should read because it's an extensive analysis of patients from Tata Hospital. And what we see is that when you routinely see patients, there are multiple things which come into play, whether they have tracheoesophageal fistulas, whether they are fit or not. And NSCT comes into play exactly in this situation, that when your patients are PS2, when you have fit patients, we are going and then you are told you have a 20% life-threatening risk. So the patient is PS2, also has weight loss, then it becomes a problem to give radical chemoradiation upfront. And hence it needs NSCT kind of a regimen to optimize the patient and then take the patients. So this would be a practical flowchart which you can follow. Locally advanced cervicalism, PS0 to 1, no TOF, no weight loss, fit for platinum, go for radical chemoradiation. If it's PS2, you can either choose from NECT and reassess or can go for radical radiation. It would depend upon what is the condition of TOF. If you have TOF, then it's better, and you're still considering a palliative regimen to give neoadjuvant chemotherapy and then reassess the patient if the TOF goes up. Problem with TOF is that it's tracheocerebral fistula. If you do radical chemoradiation, the fistula will grow inside and the patient may die because of aspiration itself. So this is a practical thing. If patient is fit, radical chemoradiation, unfit, PS2, TOF, weight loss, you want to go curative, you may select NECT followed by reassessment or reassessment in this kind of situation. And this is our own publication of what would happen if you do weekly paclitaxel and carboplatin as definitive chemoradiation. You could see here that weight loss is there in 52.5% of patients, 20% of patients are cervical. Our lengths are 6.5 centimeter, which means that majority of our patients will be greater than 5 centimeter, which is the traditional holding. We have a majority of patients which were T4, which again I will show you in most of the studies will be T3. So our kind of population is very different, and hence we deliver the different kinds of the CTRT. Of it, we take it that for that, or it would be induction followed by CTRT. And there are complications where which would happen. Like in our database, around 8% of patients do die because of this CTRT. So again, I would urge you that it's important that even in trial settings and good tertiary care centers, the mortality is between 10 to 20% in radical CTRT. So never to think that this is an easy kind of a regimen. It is going to be a tough regimen to deliver. Select your patients properly. With that, cervical esophagus, just I'll repeat. Patient is fit, radical chemoradiation. Patient is PS3, 4, palliative chemotherapy or RT. Patient is in between, like PS2, has TOF, a lot of weight loss, platinum unfit. Please give neoadjuvant chemotherapy, build the nutrition of the patients, and then assess for its fitness for radical chemoradiation. No role of surgery in cervical esophagus. We'll come to thoracic esophagus, and here is where the role of surgery comes in. Now, obviously, one thing would be that the tumor is resectable. And one thing is that whether it's functionally resectable. Understand esophagus patients, most of the times would have poor general conditions, would have comorbidities, smoking and alcohol, which are risk factors for this esophagus, also lead to a lot amount of other comorbidities. And so you would have reasons other than resectability, would we call the functional unresectability, where comorbidities, poor nutrition would be seen in this. And hence, it's important that this case is get discussed in a multidisciplinary clinic. So next few minutes we'll spend on surgery. So it's a cervical esophagus. So whether you do THE or TTE, THE is transhiatal esophagectomy, TTE is transthoracic. Obviously, it's a cervical, obviously for the thoracic esophagus, you will do a transthoracic esophagectomy. So when we do a transhiatal esophagectomy, you do a transhiatal esophagectomy for distal esophageal tumors. A transhiatal is sufficient enough. So we have evidence for that? There is evidence for that in mid and distal esophagus, especially adenocarcinomas, that transhiatal esophagectomy gives similar results as transthoracic esophagectomy. But there is also here that higher the tumor, which goes towards thoracic, the TTE is better. So for upper thoracic and mid thoracic, it's important that you consider for TTE. For distal thoracic, as was taken in this study, and for the esophageal junctional tumors, you can go for a THE. Now, the next question comes is, what is the optimal lymph node dissection? Like I told you in cervical esophagus, when we were discussing radical chemoradiation, there's no role of elective nodal radiation when you are using radiation as a radical modality. What about if you're trying to use surgery as a radical modality? Would you go for lymph node dissections? You don't go for lymph node dissections. So there's a good CI database analysis which just show that you need to dissect lymph nodes, and lymph node dissection has shown to have an impact on survival, and that should be at least 10 for T1, T2, and needs to be between 20 to 20 for T2 and 30 for T3, T4. So that's the kind of node dissection you are actually looking at. So how many fields do you resect? So there is a classic thing whenever you read esophagus is 2-field versus 3-field, 2 fields versus 3 fields. So what is this 2-field? 2-field is nothing but you dissect the entire posterior mediastinum, that is from the diaphragm up to the subcarinal nodes and the aortopulmonary nodes. If you have abdomen involved, you dissect along the vessels of the first branch of the aorta in the abdomen, that's the celiac artery, the celiac trunk, and its major branches, that was the common hepatic, the splenic, and the left gastric. And along that, the curvatures of the stomach and the lesser omentum. So that would be called as what also is called as D2 nephrectomy when the stomach part gets involved. But for the esophagus parts, when it's done for thoracic, it would be called as 2-field, standard 2-field. So you are dissecting basically the mediastinum, 2 lymph node fields are dissecting. Extended 2 fields, if you extend this from the subcarinal and you go to the right paratracheal gutter, it's called extended 2-field. A total 2-field, if you also take the left paratracheal gutter along with it, that is called the total 2-field. So that's the way. Again, I'll repeat. 2-field is when you dissect the mediastinum. It's from the subcarina downwards up to the diaphragm. Extended 2-field, you extend on the right side and take the right paratracheal gutter. What is the total 2-field? You also take the left paratracheal gutter. So that's the way it's for the 2-field. So what is exactly the 3-field? The 3-field is when you're going to take the paraesophageal lymph nodes, go upwards in the neck and even dissect the supraclavian lymph nodes. And why was that thought? It was thought because 1 out of 4 patients, even with a distal thoracic tumor, would recur in the cervical region. And hence it was thought that the clearance of the 3rd field, that's in the neck field, would lead to improvement in outcomes. Did it? That prospective evidence has suggested that it may improve, which was basically 90s and 98 it came that showed that extended dissections of the lymph nodes led to a higher blood loss, led to higher time, led to higher hospital deaths, and maybe they have a benefit on oral survival. But there is good randomized evidence which has come up now. In fact, I'll be showing you from Binley, and it got published in JTO in February 2021, and actually gives the long-term results of a 3-field versus 2-field dissection which have been done for lower thoracic cancers. And what it does show is an interesting thing, that there's no improvement in OS or DFS for doing the 3-field over a 2-field. So as of now, the evidence suggests, randomized evidence suggests that in esophageal cancer, if you do a transthoracic hysterectomy, the 2-field itself seems to be okay. These are 5-year results, so pretty mature results to suggest that it is okay to do only a 2-field, resections. In fact, there's one more study which has come up, which has shown similar results in squamous cell carcinoma. So now, whether the next question is, so we decided for thoracic tumors, we'll do a TTE. Evidence suggests that you need to do optimal lymph node dissections, and that can be done in 2 fields, whether you do open or whether you do robotic. So the long-term evidence, which has come from groups, which suggests that the outcomes are similar, whether you do it with a robotic minimally invasive surgery or open surgery. And there is no difference in the outcome. So you can choose the way you want to do it. There is evidence that if you do minimally invasive surgeries over open surgeries, certain aspect of quality of life, not all aspects, certain aspect of quality of life, like daily functioning roll up to day 30, social functioning, would improve better if you do a minimally invasive procedure. So the advantage with the minimally invasive procedure is there is now evidence that long-term outcomes are similar, and certain aspects of quality of life improvements are better with a minimally invasive surgery. So to sum up for surgery, for thoracic tumors, TTE, 2 fields, and if possible, minimally invasive if your facilities are there. But there's no survival advantage over open. So you can very well choose open also, not an issue. If it's a distal esophagus or an OE junction, THE is good enough. For a distal esophagus or EOJ, that 2-field has to get combined with a D2 type of lymphodectomy. So that would be for surgery. Now we need to understand that when you talk about esophagus in thoracic and distal, there are two types of histologies, squamous and adeno. And there are differences right from demography between squamous and adeno. And these are the differences which have been listed here. And there are differences in the biology also. For a stage by stage basis, the lymph node spread for the squamous is higher than that for an adenocarcinoma. And for the stage by stage match, the survival for an adeno is higher than a squamous. So biologically, adenocarcinomas are good. Squamous cells are not that good. And it's important to notice this because most of the studies here have a mix of adeno and squamous. The question comes as we discuss about radical chemoradiation in cervical esophagus, and we discussed that surgery was too mutilating. Up till now in thoracic, we have discussed that when you want to perform local surgery and the way you would do surgery than that. The question comes, is surgery really better than radiation? There was a randomized study, and mind you, the thing which I would point out is for operable esophageal cancer, surgery versus radiation. There is no chemo here. We know from radical chemoradiation studies that addition of chemotherapy improves outcomes over radiation. So understand the surgery has been compared to radiotherapy, and radiotherapy, at least in 2006 when the study is published, we already have evidence that radiotherapy alone is a weak. Yeah, so the match actually is heavily tilted in favor of surgery here. This gets published in the Chinese Journal of Oncology, and it's a Chinese paper. Interestingly, the radiation used here is accelerated hyperfractionated radiation, and there's no difference in outcomes between surgery and RT. So there's evidence to suggest if you use altered radiation schedules, there's no difference in outcomes between surgery and radiation. Saying that, from India, we have a study from Dr. Badwe that this was a randomized study. Again, comparison was between surgery versus radiation. There is no chemotherapy here. The comparison was actually for quality of life, and it clearly showed that both modalities improve quality of life. But the sustainability of quality of life improvement is much better with surgery. Second, in this study, there was a marginal but a survival benefit for using surgery over radical radiation alone. Whether it would stand for chemoradiation, we don't know. But in comparison to radical radiation alone, it was better surgery. So what would say that the data from our country at least shows that surgery has a better impact on quality of life of these patients and has a minuscule benefit over radiation in it. So given a choice in a thoracic tumor and even for a distal tumor, your choice should be surgery for the local therapy. Now, up till now, we have been discussing about that there is need for local therapy, and local therapy needs to be done. It has an impact on survival. It has an impact on quality of life. And debating on which of them, we decided that surgery would be the one preferred. The problem is if you do that alone, only surgery, it has damn bad outcomes. We're talking about something which is called a curative tumor. Look at the medians, 11 months, 12 months, 13 months. So only surgery, most of these patients will be dying within 1 year. These medians are actually better than glioblastoma medians. So we understand that in locally advanced, doing only surgery has bad outcomes, and we need to do something about it to improve the outcomes. Now, because the biology is different, squamous is way more aggressive, has a high amount of lymphatics. We'll discuss squamous separately, and then we'll discuss adeno separately on what we do in these things. So let's talk about what we can do. We can do is we can give something before the surgery, we can do something after the surgery, or we can give something sandwiching the surgery in between, before and after the surgery. And that's the way it has been done. So let's look at squamous. What would happen if you try to give only surgery and then give RT? So there was this Japanese study, the JCOG 8503. It said, let's do surgery, after that give RT, versus let's do surgery, after that give adjuvant chemotherapy. Adjuvant was a cisplatin Vendesin. There was no benefit in comparison to any one of them. But so the next study when they planned, they compared surgery alone in one arm with surgery followed by post-operative chemotherapy. And I'm talking about squamous cell. You could see here that all these patients are 100% squamous. Surgery was a surgery followed by post-operative chemotherapy. In this Japanese study, mind you, Japanese esophagus biology is different, and their results are not reciprocated of the world, but at least in Japanese situation, it does show that surgery followed by giving adjuvant chemotherapy in this study had a DFS and OS advantage. The next study, what they do is, that is what was done in 99, the 7th study of the GCOG. So the numbering goes is like this: in 1985, the 3rd study, 92, the 4th study, 99, the 7th study. What they did is they compared this surgery followed by chemotherapy with chemotherapy followed by surgery. And what they did see was chemotherapy followed by surgery had better, not only tolerance, but improvement in outcomes. So then the development started towards neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And we have a few studies. This is the RTOG 8911, where surgery alone was compared with perioperative cisplatin 5. You could see that 50% of the patients are squamous cells. So this is where things get diluted. And what you see is that not much improvement in terms of median OS and not much in terms of pre-op. What did it improve was the R0 resection rates, with the postoperative mortality remaining the same. Another study, OEO2, surgery alone with pre-cisplatin-5FU patient, 800 patients, more patients, but lot of adenocarcinoma. So things get again confusing here whether this applicable to adenocarcinoma, but did show a survival benefit. Now, what I'm trying to tell you is there are results which are gone each way. Negative results, positive results, negative, positive. And that's when we start doing meta-analysis to make some sense of the things. So this is meta-analysis for preoperative chemotherapy for resectable esophageal cancers. And what it shows is that, yes, it has a benefit in terms of overall survival. Now, whenever you do preoperative surgery, the idea is whether it led to an increased complication rates in the surgery. This diamond is in between, which suggests there was no increase in complication rates. So we could go back to last slide. You would see that the diamond is on this part, that is favoring the chemotherapy part. And this diamond is on this part, which does show that there is no increase in the complication rates. Now, did it lead to an improvement in R0 resection rates? The diamond again is on this part, which favors chemotherapy. So it also led to an improvement in the R0 rates and complications. So again, overall, it suggests that giving neoadjuvant chemotherapy leads to an improvement in survival. Doesn't lead to an increase in postoperative morbidity. It leads to better R0 resection rates. Another meta-analysis, this time coming in Lancet, again with the same results, that it seems to be a better regimen. Which regimen to choose? Now, when you choose NACT regimens, again, there is evidence that a taxane-based regimen may be a better option than a cis-5 kind of a regimen. We have a study running in TMH in the thoracic DMG of comparison in resectable esophageal cancers of cisplatin-5FU versus taxane plus platinum regimen. Would be the first of its kind, and which actually will give you the answers which of this regimen would be the better. But there is a good hint that paclitaxel, taxanes, platinum regimens would be likely to be better ones. But at present, the standard stands at cis-5FU regimens for NACT alone, if you want to, in squamous cell carcinoma esophagus. Normally, practically, you would put 3 to 4 cycles. You would assess them for surgery. After the chemotherapy of 1 month, you would do the surgery. Important is you need to pay attention to the nutrition, the GFR of these patients, because many of times these patients actually have weight loss. So the applicability of your Crawford and Gault becomes a problem. So if the patient has a weight of 30, 40, please get a GFR done to suggest whether the patient is eligible for cisplatin or not. And you need to also pay attention to venous thromboembolism. There's good data. I won't go because we have already, because of logistic issues, I wasted 10 minutes. That nutritional help gives a good improvement in outcomes to the patients, improves the quality of life, improves the tolerance to surgery, improves the tolerance to preoperative chemotherapy. So they need to give extensive nutritional counseling. There's also good evidence that these patients are at risk of thromboembolic events. So please do a Khurana scoring in them, and if required, please put the patient on prophylactic antithrombolysis prophylaxis. Now, this was the development in squamous for neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And we said that, okay, thoracic esophagus, I would choose surgery, but before doing surgery, I would do neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And the reason why I would do that neoadjuvant chemotherapy is because the survival benefit, no increase in complication rates of surgery, and it leads to better R0 resection rates. Now, let's look at a parallel development which happened for doing neoadjuvant chemotherapy along with RT. And again, it also shows that the evidence is in favor of giving neoadjuvant chemotherapy or RT when you compare it against surgery. And this was a big study which came, the CROSS study. Long-term results have also got published. And this was a study where people have started saying that, okay, in squamous also, in thoracic also, you need to use preoperative chemoradiation. And that's few things which I want to point out. And this is what you should do when you. This study excluded patients if they were 3 centimeters within the upper esophagus. So study never had cervical esophagus. The applicability drops down to only thoracic and lower esophagus. Second, this study, the length could not be more than 8 centimeters. This is 5 centimeters, 5 is too low, it is actually in millimeters. So 8 centimeters. I remember when I showed you Tata data, 6 centimeters was the median, and most of the patients would have beyond that. A 5 millimeter thickness means that the esophageal wall is very thin. That's a typo there. It's a 5 millimeter thickness means there's a really T2, T1, T2, T3 tumors at the best. And that's what they also mentioned. Only T1, T2, T3. So patients who have T4 were never included. Majority patients would be T2, T3. Patients who had N2 disease are never included. And this is important when you realize that this was supra fit kind of patients which were taken in the CROSS study. And if the patient had greater than 10% of weight loss, again, they were not included. So if you see the RTOG study of CTRT, 80% of the patients wouldn't fit this criteria because 80% of the patients had weight loss greater than 70% of weight loss greater than 80, and quite a few patients had sizes more than 8 centimeters also. So traditional studies, nearly 50 to 60% of patients would get excluded when you look at the way CROSS views the patients. Most of the patients were adenocarcinoma. There is a subset of squamous. Median size is 4 centimeters, and the maximum with interquartile range is 6. So 75% of the patients are below 6. And that has implications. And now, if you look at this, quite a few patients are N0, that's 35%. Most of the patients are maximum up to T3, and there's no PS2 here. So again, as I told you, all studies are on 40-50% PS2 patients. These are excluded. So in real life practice, the CROSS data, which suggests chemoradiation NSAID is for absolutely fit patients who are PS0 to 1, who have a tumor size average around 4 centimeters, at the most N1 disease, and tumor thickness, which is less than or around 5 millimeters. And to get such patients is difficult. Tumor median thickness in our databases is of 15 millimeters. Most of our patients, quite a few of our patients are N1, N2, N3 are also there. T4, T3 are majority of our patients, and our median lengths are 6 or 7 centimeters. So understand that when you say that NACTRT according to CROSS, it did show benefit. It did show benefit with respect to surgery in both adenocarcinoma and squamous, and more so in squamous. If you see the hazard ratio is better in squamous. And yes, you need to use this CROSS regimen. So what is CROSS regimen? So they compared surgery versus NACTRT. NACTRT was a 41.4 grades of radiation with weekly paclitaxel and carboplatin followed by surgery. So you have surgery alone versus weekly paclitaxel carboplatin along with RT followed by surgery. And it showed an immense OS benefit. But remember, this immense OS benefit is in very selected patient groups. This has replicated in the NeoCRATEC study, especially done for squamous, where again you had such kind of patients with no PS2 patients are taken, the sizes are less, and again the data seems to be similar, that there is benefit of giving neoadjuvant CTRT. Now, the question comes, what do you use? You use neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery, or you use Neogen CTIT followed by surgery. According to me, these two are never compared head to head. So you cannot choose one over the other. If you interpret the literature is very clear that if you do cross-trial comparisons, that the amount of benefit which has been derived from NACT-ART seems to be large, and large, especially for squamous cell carcinoma, not that much for adenocarcinomas. So if it is thoracic tumor, if it's a squamous, and if it fits into the criteria of the cross study, that is PS01, size in and around 4 centimeters, thickness less than 5 millimeters, no weight loss, sure go for NACT-ART followed by surgery. If it doesn't fit in, then the problem is choose neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery, and that would be the case in most of our situations. Now, when you have cross-trial comparison, there's no head-to-head trials much. It seems that NACT-ART is better than neoadjuvant chemotherapy, especially if you see this for for squamous, for adeno, the boundary crosses one, so it's in the more or less similar, but there is very limited head-to-head trials which are there. Let's one of this is this POET study, preoperative chemotherapy versus chemotherapy, and what it shows is when you look for head-to-head comparisons, there is no benefit. So whether in the POET study, the patients were given chemotherapy followed by surgery was done, or CTIT followed by surgery was done. Small study of 120 patients, you cannot derive great interpretation from this, but it does show that there is no survival benefit. There is a trend towards benefit to CTIT, but there is something interesting I want to show you. In this trial setting, the inpatient hospital mortality was around 10.2% for NACT-ART. Understand, when you give NACT-ART, the dose is 41.4. Radical, the dose is 50.4. I told you that 20% of your patient would have life-threatening complications. And here in a trial, we are talking about 10% mortality. Now that's the importance of selecting the appropriate patient for CTIT. We at our hospital also had a few deaths post NACT-ART, and hence we practice more of a neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by surgery. So what I'm trying to tell you is, on paper, the evidence looks good for cross-fit patients for NACT-ART followed by surgery. But practically, you need to see whether it's deliverable in a setup, whether your surgeon is sure that he can do the anastomosis without getting fistulas, whether you have that post-operative backup to get the patient out of these complications. Because post NACT-ART, as opposed to neoadjuvant chemotherapy, the post-operative complications are definitely much higher, and they lead to quite around 10% of mortality even in trial settings. So, and this is one more thing which I just wanted to put into that how can you come down with this post-operative complications with the NACT-ART. One of the ways this was a good study which came from Nelson and published in Annals of Surgery, was normally we operate them at 4 to 6 weeks. They try to operate them up to 10 to 12 weeks. And when they looked at the complication, it looks that even if you delay the duration, the initial outcome seems to be similar, and but there are no much differences between the anatomic leak, necrosis, chyle leak, pneumonias. So again, suggesting, so you could see here that the overall incidence when you do this procedures of complications for Clavin-Dindo scales grade 2 or fewer is in the range of 60 to 70%. So understand that esophageal surgeries would have 60 to 70% severe complications, and 10 to 20% of them will be mortalities. So it is a pretty toxic therapy. Now the question comes in, and this is an interesting question. NACT-ART, you do surgery, you get complications. Do you need to do surgery after NACT-ART? And this is a nice question to ask. And this was studied in the FFCD 92, old study. You gave CTIT initial part, randomize the patient to surgery versus continuation of CTRT till the radical dose. No difference in survival. So this is another way of looking at this data. Again, when you look at this data, I told you old studies will to classical patients, and you could see the diameter greater than 5 centimeters, 49-50% of them. Weight loss greater than around 20% of the patients. So again, a good mix of poorest patients have been taken. That's what you look at in the studies, that how good mix of poorest patients are also taken in this in the studies. Now, what I'm going to tell you after this is, so the question now is, we go back to that. We were talking about thoracic tumors. We decided that surgery is important, better than radiation. Surgery, we would, for thoracic, we'll do TTE, we'll do two-field, we'll give extensive nutritional support to these patients. We know that the outcomes are not good. So either we have the choice of pre-operative chemotherapy and then doing the surgery, or the choice of NaCTRT, then doing the surgery. We know that NaCTRT has complications. So you select your patients properly for NaCTRT, and then you can deliver this regimen, or you can go for chemotherapy followed by surgery. And the problem is, we discuss about THE, lymph node dissection. That all was when primary surgery is done. Do the principles remain the same when you do surgery after NACT? More or less, yes. The principles do remain the same. One thing more, however, has got it added up. We had seen that the residual disease is seen in around 50% of the patients after these neoadjuvant treatments. There's a good study called Checkmate 577 around a good number of patients, around 800 patients actually, in which patients who didn't have a pathological complete response got randomized between giving adjuvant nivolumab for around a 1 year treatment versus giving the standard, that is doing nothing and observing the patients. In this study, it was actually placebo. What it did, it would lead to a good amount of a benefit. You could see the DFS jumping from 11 months to 22 months. And this is now considered the standard of care. So neoadjuvant interventions, surgery, no complete response, giving nivolumab for 1 year with a complete treatment for the thoracic tumors. Before I go ahead, I'll just dwindle a few situations. Many of these patients would have elderly, they would have added comorbidities. So what to do? There's good evidence that fit elderly patients do as good as non-geriatric patients. So treat them appropriately. There's a good analysis which has come for the pool data of OEO2, OEO05, the MAGIC and ST3, which again shows that age is just a number. Fit elderly do as better as in fact, do better than the younger group in this study actually of 3,000 plus patients. Interestingly, it was also seen that females do better in this data set of 300, and that actually tells you that maybe we need to look at the biology. So how would you go for a locally advanced esophageal cancer if it's in the thoracic? I would see whether the patient is cross-fit, less than 8, no weight loss, mainly T2, and then one ECOG. And then if my setup is feasible, would select NACTRT surgery, PAT-CR, yes, observation, no, nivolumab. Or else I would take the patient for NACT surgery and do the surgery. Now the question is, what you do after the surgery? You could do observation, and if the patient is margin positive or external extension, whether you give adjuvant CTRT or not is a question which needs to be answered, and at present has been answered by Dr. Narona in a randomized study. Adenocarcinoma. I have not gone into details of adenocarcinoma. I'm sure Vikas or Anant will be taking a gastric lecture, and they would be talking about this in details. So I thought that I'll focus on thoracic tumors, which are not that concentrated or most of the times, and which unfortunately for us are majority of our patients. So when you look at adenocarcinomas, you could see that there is good evidence for giving adjuvant chemotherapy. You could see here the ACT-GA study for S1, classic for giving Xaloxa. There's a good evidence that giving adjuvant chemotherapy works. There's good evidence that doing preoperative chemotherapy works, like for the MAGIC study, the FF study, and the latest what we use in our OPD is FLOT. It is 4 cycles of FLOT followed by surgery for 4 cycles of FLOT. So there's evidence you could use adjuvant chemotherapy, evidence to suggest that you could use perioperative chemotherapy. There's also evidence to suggest that you could use neoadjuvant chemotherapy. is also evidence to some extent that you could use some amount of adjuvant CTRT if only surgery has been done. Whether adjuvant CTRT is useful when you have given NACT, not much of a benefit in them. In the initial ARTIST study which came. So if you have an adenocarcinoma, distal or EOJ, the best way would be either you go for the preoperative chemotherapy, which is the latest in the FLOT regimen, go for 4 cycles followed by surgery, followed by for 4 cycles. If it undergoes surgery, you can use a very well regimen like that of a Xalox into 8 for giving adjuvant chemotherapy. And this is what I would suggest for patients who are overall for esophageal cancer. If they're fit for preoperative CTRT, go for that. Not, select a preoperative chemotherapy, do surgery, and then accordingly you go forward. A few interesting things. Actually did a PubMed search yesterday for last 1 year. I took this class last year in September 2020. In last 1 year, what new has come out? A few new things which I could find where there is some evidence that doing locally advanced esophageal cancer treatment with proton, now there are proton centers in India, you may get a call from few of your relatives whether you could choose proton. No survival benefit of using proton in esophagus. Some amount of side effects do decrease. And with that, I think that's all from me. I would like to take any questions if you have. And sorry for the delay which we had today. Okay, so there are some after NAC. Couldn't patient need adjuvant chemotherapy after surgery? Okay, no evidence for adjuvant. That's correct. So Madam has already answered that. For squamous carcinoma, there is not much evidence for adjuvant chemotherapy after giving NACT. That evidence is mainly in distal esophagus, that is adenocarcinomas. Any other question from anyone is there? Or I was that clear? Good.
Vijay, can I ask one thing?
Yes, ma'am, you can ask. Okay.
If you can go back to your flow chart, pehle wala ki, if the patient has tracheal involvement, poor PS. Because I have a doubt in that. I think we always have this argument in the JC that if the patient is not fit for chemoradiotherapy, I think your flowchart goes to radical radiation, right? So my question is, do we consider this as radical radiation? From RTOG 8501, the 5-year survival is 0. So my understanding is if it is in the radical setting.
So I agree with you. So the term radical has been used with very loosely in esophagus because I don't know why they say it radical, because what you say is perfectly correct, and I'll just show the results so that the student understand the context of this. What Madam is trying to tell you is that in esophageal cancers, let me go back to that study. In esophageal cancers, when you use only radical radiation, this was the randomized. So if you use only radical radiation, and if you could see here that the median is only 7.1 months. So I would take your point that it would actually be palliative radiation only.
So because then, as you increase the dose of radiotherapy, the toxicity increases. So I always argue for this, that give PAL-RT, then why are you going to...
I agree with you. That you could say that what more could you decrease from 7.1 months of lifespan? So most of the PAL-RT trials have shown similar results. So I agree with you. You could go ahead with PAL-RT also in that situation. So there's a question from Ingraj. Lower third adenocarcinoma, what is the best approach? According to me, lower third adenocarcinoma, the better approach would be to give FLOT into 4, followed by, Madam has a difference of opinion. Okay, but my FLOT into 4 surgery followed by FLOT into 4. Because I'm more, so I'll tell you, the reason stands from that is on paper, as I told you, cross looks very good. But the issue is that whether it's feasible to do cross in your setup. At least in my setup that we started in between, so we had stopped giving NSAID-RT. We were giving neoadjuvant. We started in between last year. We got again ambitious with the long-term data. Again, we have stopped because of post-operative mortalities. So in this setup of TMH, I still think neoadjuvant chemotherapy, FLOT into 4, has shown amazing results in adenocarcinoma. So my personal choice is FLOT into 4 followed by surgery followed by FLOT into 4. Saying that NCCN also gives you both these options. Either you choose preoperative chemotherapy, surgery, and then, or you can go by that the regimen which Madam suggested of using a cross like A, do surgery. If no PAT-CR, go for a nivolumab, nivolumab kind of maintenance.
And I totally agree, Lingaraj. If you notice, I said the most widely used regimen. I didn't say the regimen that we are using. So this is globally, I think, and that question had, arose, right? That's why the NeoAegis was the study that was used to evaluate this, and prelim results were presented at ASCO this year, which evaluated cross versus either MAGIC. So it had started at the MAGIC time, then it changed to FLOT. So MAGIC or FLOT versus cross. They found no benefit, so there was futility, and they stopped the study. So there was no real difference. But in terms of surrogate markers like PAT-CR, R0 resection, etc., that was higher with cross. So the uptake of cross followed by surgery versus followed by 2 years of adjuvant immunotherapy seems to me at least globally most widely used. But again, there's no clear benefit for one versus the other.
Ma'am, what is the outcome of patients who attain PAT-CR after NSAID-RT by cross regimen?
So I want to say about 40 to 60%, something in that range is their long-term survival.
And is the same outcome holds true with FLOT kind of regimen, the PAT-CR in both the type of regimen?
No, it was a higher PAT-CR for, so you're talking FLOT versus cross, right?
Yeah, PAT-CR.
Yeah. No, I think there is clear data, and that adding RT in the neoadjuvant setting increases the PAT-CR. I think that's no question about that.
Yeah, there's no question about that, Lingaraj, that adding RT to the FLOT regimen would, or for that matter, not for FLOT, because the taxane leads to improvement in PAT-CR.
Thank you.
So, like, if you are in TMC Kolkata, or if you are in Coimbatore, like these are the two people which I know in India personally, the TMC Kolkata group and the Coimbatore group by Dr. Bharat Rangarajan, who practices the cross in and out. So every patient goes for cross, but all centers where I've spoken
because yes, sir. Because in a fit situation, if you have a situation now, you have PAT-CR to improve outcome, and in those who don't have the PAT-CR, you have Nivo to kind of give after that. So which you don't have that option with FLOT kind of regimen. So in that way, I think if somebody is absolutely fitting into criteria of cross, then that should be that's a personal feeling. So looking at
that's absolutely correct. Lingaraj, that if that's what the flow chart where I showed you, if the patient is fitting into cross, go ahead with the cross kind of a regimen. The problem is that a cross kind of regimen, though in cross study not, but in subsequent like POET and all and others, such kind of regimens have shown to have post-operative mortality. So you should have that backup. What I'm trying to tell you is that you should have the law. Just don't follow that because it's given on paper that it will be true in your at your center. You need to have those kinds of surgical expertise, that kind of a backup to see that the patient comes out of the post-operative. So there's no point in having a PAT-CR and the patient dying in ICU. No?
True, absolutely.
So that is the fair area.
So the other point I wanted to add, this will be a manuscript that will be published in the next issue of CRST. There is a real-world data from Sangrur on their experience of using the cross regimen in patients with locally advanced CA esophagus, but they do not have thoracic surgical expertise. So, this is a very important issue that you need to have a thoracic surgeon in your institute. So they did the cross regimen, but then they referred patients out for surgery. So they found that only 53% of patients were actually able to complete the trimodality therapy. So that is also something important to keep in mind. And it wasn't just because of unavailability. Patients felt better after neoadjuvant CTRT, so they defaulted, etc.
Hello. Hi, Vanita. So for patients who did not undergo surgery, I think, of course, you'll let us know what the outcomes. So were there, if somebody received CTRT, could not undergo surgery because of whatever unavailability of surgeon. So how does kind of their survival fare? I don't know.
So the numbers were unfortunately too small to actually tell this. They tried, so in some patients, they tried to escalate the radiotherapy to 50 gray. But the point is that, you are planning surgery 6 weeks after your NACTRT, right? I mean, you want the patient to recover from the toxicity of NACTRT and then you plan your surgery. So having that break in radical CTRT and then going back and giving more RT, it may not be the best way. It's very unclear to tell. So they actually had given me the survival data, but I asked them to remove it because giving the data for 5 or 10 patients doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think we don't have that data.
Yeah, I will take 2 or 3 minutes more. So this is because I guess quite a few residents and faculties didn't know this. We are having a lung cancer update meeting, which will be on 10th, 11th and 12th of December. But along with that, on 3rd, 4th and 5th, we have workshops. And these workshops are pretty interesting this time. Like what I thought would be of interest to most will be on 3rd, we have a statistic workshop, which starts around 2:30 p.m. and goes up to 6 p.m. And that statistic workshops actually has lectures on survival analysis. Along with that is a risk-based modeling, which will be taught, and that will be taught from Dr. Gajendra, who is an expert from IIT Dhanbad, and analysis of quality of life data. Sorry, the time is from 5:30 to 8:30.
Vijay, are you sharing screen? Because we can't see anything.
Oh, you can't see? Okay.
I can only see you.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll again share the screen for the workshop so that...
Sorry.
Can it be seen now?
Yes.
So there's a good statistic workshop, which is of this. It's a hybrid meeting. It is free for registration for all students. I actually want students to come and attend and personally, because you won't get to interact with such kinds of faculty daily. The quality of life analysis is something which at least I am looking at toward interacting. This is done by Dr. Ramesh, who is the chief statistician for URTC for doing QL analysis. So whatever doubts you have, maybe simple, maybe complicated, please win. The times are, though the slots are given for 20 minutes, I have personally requested the people that if there are more discussion, that would be allowed, and we can extend the time till 9 p.m. also. Hybrid kind of meeting. So if someone cannot come personally, I will be sharing the link on the faculty, not the faculty, on the trailing mail of our lectures, so that anyone who is interested can register. Along with that, there are another interesting workshop which is there on by Dr. Amay, and this is a nuclear medicine theranostic workshop. Again, this is a very good workshop to attend from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on this, and this is mainly related to neuroendocrine neuroendocrine tumors. What are the new targets and the role of PRRT, things which are coming new in prostate, and on theranostic or fibroblastic actions. This is nothing to do with lung, and this is purely a thing where we do not get to interact with nuclear medicine people about how theranostics are run, how do they select targets. So if you could see the faculty here, the majority of faculty here is one who has done original work in that. So you can be free to join in that. We have a brain mets workshop. Unfortunately, I don't think he has not put मेरे वर्कशॉप का ही उसने ये डाला नहीं है. ठीक है, that again is interesting. While you could interact with Manmeet Ahluwalia and the lady who actually, her name is Jia, who made the intrathecal nivolumab preparation. Again, there is a molecular workshop which is again interesting, where you could interact with a lot of this is NGO ka dal diya yaar. So there's a molecular workshop where you could discuss about things of molecular. There is an oncofertility workshop. If Jaya madam could make it to this this lady actually does a lot of work on how to preserve the ovum, how to preserve the fertility of this patient. And there's a geriatric workshop by Vanita ma'am, which would discuss about all aspects of geriatric care. So I would, for resident, it's compulsory. I won't say that you have a choice. So please come and attend these things, because most of the times you won't be getting such kind of way. And I will be sharing the links with link in the year. Any faculty who's interested, it's free registration. Anyone can, even if you're not registered, you can just walking on the day of your workshop. If any logistics need to be arranged, let me know, because all the workshops physically are going to be in Sahara, which is near the airport. So if travel arrangements, anything is required for you, just direct message me. I'll see that it's done. That's all from my side. I think Kumar sir is not there today, so I would request Dr. Jaya madam to do the resident meet today. Jaya ma'am. So the Jaya ma'am is not there. So Amit sir, Joshi sir.
I think the usual things. I think still the numbers are very low, but I think we need to continue with the precaution. And I think what Vijay had told, these are a great opportunity for residents to learn these conferences, so we can get interact and we'll get a different aspect of the treatment from the regular what we do. And those people who are deeply involved in those work, so I will request everyone at least go physically if possible, because then you learn the things better. And if not possible, then try to attend online. This will be very interesting workshops placed in day.
With that, we can close the thing. If anyone has any comments or anything, then we'll close today's class. Thank you for the attendance and sorry for the logistic issues which we had.